They held him down. The searing, white-hot liquid metal was brought closer. This wasn't just silver. It was justice, twisted into its most horrific form. He could feel the intense heat on his face before the first drop even touched his skin. Then, the torrent came. A stream of boiling silver pouring into his eyes, his nose, his screaming mouth, searing flesh and cooking him from the inside out. This was more than just an execution. It was a gruesome theatrical display designed to punish a man with the very riches he craved. But who was this man, and what could he possibly have done to inspire such a legendary death? What happens when you defy the most feared conqueror on the planet? For one medieval governor, the answer was a punishment so gruesome it almost defies belief. Now, this isn't just a myth or a campfire horror story. It's a dark chapter from real history, where a single act of betrayal triggered one of the bloodiest invasions the world had ever seen. Here on Chronicles of Cruelty, we unearth the most brutal stories from the past. Today, we're investigating the story of Inalchuq, the governor of Otrar. His fate, to be cooked alive with molten silver, has become a legendary tale of how one man's greed can doom an entire empire. If you have a thirst for the darker, often untold side of history, you've come to the right place. Please consider subscribing to support the channel and help us uncover more of these forgotten truths. To understand this one horrific act, we have to get a picture of the world in the early 13th century. It was an era defined by two colossal powers, practically destined to collide. In the west, you had the Khwarezmian Empire. Stretching across Persia and Central Asia, it was a fabulously wealthy and sophisticated powerhouse. Its cities, Samarkand, Bukhara, Urgench, were jewels of the Islamic world, buzzing with learning, art, and trade. The empire was a mighty gatekeeper to the west, controlling a vital chunk of the legendary Silk Road. The Shah, Ala ad-Din Muhammad II, commanded a massive army and ruled a kingdom that seemed, to many, to be the center of the civilized world. He was powerful, proud, and maybe just a little too confident. Meanwhile, in the east, a storm was gathering on the steppes of Mongolia. Genghis Khan, once a tribal outcast named Temujin, had done the impossible. He had united the feuding Mongol tribes into a single, disciplined and utterly ruthless fighting force. So far, his conquests had mostly focused on unifying other nomadic peoples and challenging the Jin dynasty in China. His empire was built on loyalty, merit, and a military machine the world had never seen. By 1218, the Mongol and Khwarezmian empires weren't just distant rumors to each other anymore. A buffer state between them had fallen, and they now shared a border. Two worlds, one built on ancient urban wealth, the other on nomadic military might, were suddenly face to face. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reshape the continent. Invading the Khwarezmian Empire wasn't originally on Genghis Khan's to-do list. His eyes were still mostly on his campaigns in China. Instead, he saw a different kind of opportunity with his new, powerful neighbor, trade. The Silk Road was the economic artery of Eurasia, and a formal trade deal could bring incredible wealth to both empires. To make this happen in 1218, the Khan sent a massive trade caravan. It was made up of around 450 men, mostly Muslim merchants, loaded with fine goods and led by a Mongol ambassador. The mission was simple: open up a new era of commerce with the Shah. The caravan's first stop was the frontier city of Otrar, a key trading hub in the Khwarezmian Empire. And Otrar was run by a man named Inalchuq. Inalchuq wasn't just the governor, he was also the Shah's uncle, which gave him a lot of power and influence. When the Mongol caravan arrived, Inalchuq didn't see an opportunity. He saw a threat, or maybe just an irresistible temptation. He accused the merchants of being Mongol spies, While it's possible some men in the caravan were gathering intelligence, it's far more likely Inalchuq was paranoid, or that he just made up the accusation as an excuse to seize their incredible wealth for himself. Without waiting for a final order, but with the Shah's eventual disastrous approval, Inalchuq made a decision that would seal his fate. He had the entire caravan arrested and executed. All 450 men were slaughtered, and their vast riches were confiscated. A single camel driver managed to escape the massacre and began the long journey back to Mongol lands, carrying the news that was about to set the world on fire. The news of the Otrar massacre hit the Mongol court like a thunderbolt. For Genghis Khan, this was so much more than murder and theft. It was a deep and unforgivable insult. In Mongol culture, ambassadors and envoys were sacred. To harm one was to directly attack the Khan himself. But even then, the great Khan showed a flash of restraint. He gave diplomacy one last chance. He sent a second mission, this time a small delegation of 3 diplomats, 1 Muslim and 2 Mongols, straight to the Shah. The demand was clear and simple: hand over Inalchuq to be punished for his crimes. It was a final chance for the Shah to prevent a catastrophe, to disown his governor's actions and make things right. The Shah's response was an act of arrogance so extreme it doomed his entire empire. He didn't just refuse the Khan's demand, he escalated the insult in the worst way imaginable. He ordered the lead diplomat, the Muslim envoy, to be beheaded. Then he had the beards of the 2 Mongol diplomats shaved off, a profoundly humiliating act meant to strip them of their honor, and sent them back to Genghis Khan with their leader's severed head. There would be no more talking. The path of diplomacy was closed, soaked in blood and disrespect. For Genghis Khan, this was the ultimate betrayal. The story goes that he climbed a mountain, prayed for 3 days, and came down with a vow of pure vengeance. He turned the full might of the Mongol war machine westward. The campaign that followed wasn't going to be a border dispute. It would be an invasion of total annihilation. The Mongol invasion was swift and devastating, and one of the very first targets was, of course, the city of Otrar. For 5 long months, Inalchuq and his men put up a stubborn defense, but the city's fate was sealed. The Mongols eventually breached the walls and poured into the streets. Inalchuq himself fled to the inner citadel, holding out for another month with his last loyal guards. In a final, desperate act, they resorted to throwing bricks from the citadel roof down at the Mongols. But the Mongols wanted him alive. Eventually, his last guards fell, and the governor was captured. There would be no quick beheading for the man whose greed had started this war. Genghis Khan had something special planned, a punishment that was as symbolic as it was sadistic. And this is where history blurs into a gruesome legend. The story goes that in front of a crowd of Mongol officers, Inalchuq was held down. A cauldron was brought out and filled with silver, perhaps the very treasures he had plundered. The metal was heated until it glowed white-hot. This kind of death was a dark form of poetic justice. Pouring molten metal on someone was a legendary punishment for greed. An old story claims the Roman general Crassus, famous for his avarice, was executed by the Parthians with molten gold. Now it was Inalchuq's turn. He craved riches, and so he would be drowned in them. While the Mongols did have a tradition of not spilling the blood of captured nobility, there's no proof they used this specific method. It's more likely a tale that grew over time to fit the crime. They say the molten silver was poured directly into his eyes, ears, and down his throat. The effect would have been immediate and nightmarish. The liquid would have instantly boiled his eyeballs and burst his eardrums, searing through the soft tissue of his face and skull. He was, in the most literal sense, cooked alive from the inside out. It was an end born from a storyteller's darkest imagination, a perfect, agonizing punishment for a man consumed by greed. The gruesome end of Inalchuq whether by silver or a more mundane execution, wasn't an end. It was just the beginning. The utter destruction of Otrar and the fate of its governor were a terrifying message that echoed across Central Asia. After Otrar, the Mongol horde, split into armies led by Genghis Khan and his sons, became an unstoppable tide of conquest. They swept across the Khwarezmian Empire, besieging and plundering its greatest cities. Bukhara, a center of learning, was burned to the ground. The great capital of Samarkand fell and was ravaged. The assault on the city of Gurganj was so brutal that when it finally fell, the Mongols were ordered to systematically exterminate the population. Some accounts claim each of the 50,000 Mongol soldiers was ordered to execute 24 citizens. The once mighty Khwarezmian Empire was utterly destroyed. Its cities were left in ruins, its canals shattered, and a huge portion of its population was wiped out in one of the bloodiest wars in human history. The Shah, Muhammad II, became a hunted man, pursued relentlessly by Mongol generals. He eventually died alone and broken on a small island in the Caspian Sea. The arrogance that led him to execute an ambassador cost him absolutely everything. The fall of Khwarezmia was a turning point in world history. It was a sign of what was coming for the rest of the Islamic world and Eastern Europe. With this powerful empire erased from the map, the path was wide open for the Mongols to push further west, leading to their invasions of Kievan Rus, Poland, and Hungary. A single act of greed by a local governor, magnified by the pride of his king, hadn't just doomed his own people, it had irrevocably changed the course of history for an entire continent. The story of Inalchuq is a chilling reminder of how history can turn on the actions of one person. His decision at Otrar, born from greed, unleashed a storm of retribution that consumed a nation, and his legendary execution, a horrifying spectacle of poetic justice, stands as one of history's most brutal and symbolic punishments. He was a man who craved silver, and in the end, the story tells us it filled his senses and became the last thing he ever knew. It's a grim reminder that sometimes the darkest stories aren't fiction, they're history. What is the most creative and cruel execution you've ever heard of? Let us know in the comments below. We read everyone and are always looking for the next dark story to unearth. If you found this descent into the past compelling, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the brutal side of history. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay curious.